Yes, here we go. Welcome back to the Coffee with Joffrey podcast. This is episode number 69. And today we're talking about how much exercise is too much exercise. And I'm delighted to be joined by my fellow coach, Patrick Maye, who is, this is his first podcast with me. First podcast ever, mate?
Yeah, making the debut today. To say I've been looking forward to it would be maybe a little bit of a lie. When you took me on board and you mentioned how we'll be doing loads of podcasts, I was like, great.
Man, I've been waiting to jam with someone on these podcasts for a while. I mean, I love getting the guests on and super insightful learning from other people. But I know we're going to have some great conversations. Obviously, the stuff that we talk about on a day-to-day basis with our members, with our own training. I think it would just be good to someone to kind of chat and bounce ideas off, and then obviously share that with the podcast listeners as well. Patrick, before we get into today, do you want to just give a very quick introduction to yourself, just to let people know who you are, what you do?
Of course, yeah. So like yourself, I'm a personal trainer and coach. My background is based around strength and conditioning work. I've been a fully qualified personal trainer now for going on 4 years. So in terms of being in the industry, haven't got too much time, but I've experienced like different environments. I used to be a freelance when I first started, and I've also worked on a corporate site as well. And then I made the transition over here, and then obviously been working closely with you for the past, over 6 months, 7-8 months now. So yeah, it's just flown by.
Yeah, and I think if anybody ever checks out your Instagram, and I'll tag this in, they'll be able to tell that you do a lot of sports. You're kind of like me. You do a lot of different sports: cycling, tennis, regular gym work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the reasons why you likely brought me on, because we're very similar in that aspect. We have a wide variety of training modalities. Like, absolutely love a variety of things. Our strength training, long distance work, running, cycling, you name it.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, mate, let's get into it then. So how much exercise is too much? And in this podcast, maybe this caught someone's attention listening now, who maybe thinks they might be overtraining, maybe they're not seeing the progress that they like or they want to see within their training. Maybe they're feeling burnt out. I was hoping we could kind of summarize in this podcast and go over maybe some of the points that they're falling on or they're experiencing, and how we can kind of give them advice to get out of that. I think the first thing to attack though is, yes, we're talking about how much exercise is too much, but I think the initial overview of exercise in general is that people aren't doing it enough when we look at the general population. And that's what we do with the Brand Movement Wins. That's you as a trainer, me as a trainer. We're always trying to encourage people to exercise more. And I don't think that should be overlooked. But yes, there is a small minority of people who are probably doing too much, and then they're actually having a negative effect on their health and fitness or their lifestyle in general. So let's attack it from this point of view then. There's loads of individual factors that go into someone's training, right? When they first get into a gym, or if they've been training for a long time, there's so many different factors. Time that they have to train, they can dedicate to training based on, their lifestyle, their work, their family, their current fitness level, age. How do you find setting a training program for someone in the beginning based on their kind of time restraints?
When it comes to like programming, it's like so important. You know the fundamentals. How we go to like the fit principle. Very basic, really basic. How frequent they're training. What their normal training pattern will be throughout the week. Are they going to be training 2 times a week, 3, 4? It all depends. Okay. And then you dive into what specifically or how hard they want to train. Okay, what's their goals, and then relate it to how hard that intensity is going to be. Okay, and that's also a key component that we need to kind of work on, and the type of training. Okay, so again, looking at the type, so variety, Again, would it be strength and conditioning work, or do they need something else beforehand? You know, can we rush into that, and just making sure we have the big picture first before specific before going into that, and then the time as well. So just going over quickly, like how much can they dedicate to their workout? You know, are they someone who only can do 20 to 30 minutes per session, or do they have a little bit more flexibility when it comes to working out?
Yeah, I think that's super important. And obviously what we do with the movement wins tracker, and where that was kind of born from, was trying to set people obviously an agreed target, but a real like manageable target for someone. And it's not, from the outset, it might look like, with all the leaderboards and the gamification of the movement wins tracker, which is motivating in itself. From the outside, it might look like it's something that's promoting perhaps overtraining. But what's really important to understand is when someone first comes onto that tracker or starts to work with myself or you on a personal training basis or in the group classes, that conversation is around about the things that we've just mentioned. You know, how many times can you train? What sort of time frame have you got? What is your current fitness level? That type of stuff. And then from that, we're able to set a measurable target and say, hey, what's the minimum that you can do this week? Or what's the minimum that you can do next week, for the next month, for the rest of your life? What's the minimum that you can do? Because what we're trying to promote with Movement Wins is that exercise, and we don't need to go on about how beneficial exercise is in terms of physical, mental, social health. We know that. We can list off the things. People know it. But we still see these times where people go through prolonged periods of their life not exercising. And that's perhaps where they start to become unconditioned, sedentary. They start to develop maybe health conditions, putting on body fat or unwanted weight. So it's about having those real conversations in the beginning and go, hey, what are you capable of? And then once you've got that, it's easy for us as trainers, as coaches, to go, okay, well, here's what we expect. We agree on that. You have the time to do it. Even if you had the busiest week ever at work, you know, family life getting in the way, that type of stuff, you still have that expectation to reach it. And what I really love about the tracker is that it's not biased towards doing a gym workout or doing cycling or doing running or swimming. It's literally saying, hey, go and do some purposeful exercise. That might be you going for a 20-minute walk at the end of your before you go to bed. That might be you sticking on something on YouTube on the TV and doing a quick core workout, some of that. Whatever it is to you, that purposeful exercise that allows you to reach that target. And then we just keep it super simple with that calorie target, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And just feeding off that, you know, I was discussing this with my partner, and when it comes to the tracker, you know, we both was feeling like unmotivated, but then we used the tracker and we was like, right, what can we do this evening? We hadn't really done anything, and we just kept it nice and simple. We just went out for a leisurely run, and we felt miles better for it.
Yeah, so then that's great. And it's the same for me and anybody on the tracker as well. That's what it's there for. And then as we're talking on this podcast, the other side of that is weeks that you are feeling more motivated, perhaps people who are doing more than their target because they have the time, they have more ability to go out and do the workouts. But then, you know, that on a weekly, a one-off week is fine. If someone's constantly doing double the work that is maybe prescribed from the coach, it might be amazing in the beginning, going, oh, this is great. Like, they're really into their fitness, but that's going to lead somewhere, right? And that's probably going to lead to some sort of burnout. That's going to lead to some sort of, I mean, let's start with burnout. One of the things I read there's a great book called Peak Performance, and it's burnout is not a badge of honor. And I've definitely been in a position before when I've been training and exercising that I've gone, yeah, I'm doing the most work here. I am, you know, I'm training 2-3 hours a day. I'm doing double sessions. You know, I'm doing multiple modalities. I'm going for long runs in the morning and doing gym workouts, and feeling like it was a badge of honor. But that burnout comes around very quickly. Have you ever experienced anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we, even as fitness professionals, we go through spells. We go through spells where we obviously, you know, dive into it. We go 100 miles per hour at times. But then we are human. We do suffer with this, and I've certainly suffered with this. I've gone into sessions, and I just couldn't mentally push anymore. And I've been pretty good compared to other people, in the sense, like, listening to my body and knowing when to, like, step back and not push it. Because, like you say, you probably experienced, going that extra bit further, and it just, leads to unnecessary injuries and even more stress, physiological and psychological as well.
Yeah, and I think it's like what you said there about listening to your body. And I think one of the things that probably isn't talked about much, I think people understand that being physically exhausted from working out, i.e. doing a tough workout one day or for a couple of weeks, and then not being able to physically get themselves to the gym because of the soreness, the delayed onset of muscular soreness, because of, just feeling completely drained and wiped, and perhaps that's not why they go. But then there's other characteristics to burnout that aren't really talked about. And I'm feeling unmotivated and not actually wanting to go to the gym. They are consistent signs of being burnt out as well. So I always find that's a real reflection of what happens to people when they haven't been doing anything for a long time and they jump in with this new fitness journey. They're starting the latest diet. They're going to the gym 4, 5, 6 days a week. They're like, load me up. I'm going to do everything because I am on a real mission to, lose the weight that I want. And that, in the beginning, when the motivation is high, is really easy to do. Even when you're a bit tired, you're like, first week, I can't give up on this now. Ultimately, that's going to be something that dies away. And then by the second week, third week, you're actually associating burnout and being tired and being overtrained and potentially at risk of injury. You're confusing that with lack of motivation. I'm just not as fit as I thought I was. I'm not as motivated as that person, as that coach or that friend. They've got more than me. I mean, in reality, you've just probably not eaten enough and done too much training.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if we rewind as well, when it comes to, suffering with, burnout, exhaustion, are we missing something? Are we missing out on the cornerstones of fitness as well? Looking at sleep, your recovery, and stress, obviously a big problem, like physiological and psychological as well. So that's whenever I go into a session, I always have that checkpoint with a client, just to get feedback, like how they're doing, in every aspect, just checking in. Are they actually up for it, motivated, in terms of getting feedback from their last session, what's happened throughout their week, and just getting feedback, and then seeing where they're at.
Yeah, I think that's important, having those touch points that you just mentioned there. And I think you'll agree with this as a coach, and I think most coaches will agree with this. As a coach, it is easy to wipe the floor with a client, with a member, with programming. I could do it in 5 minutes. Give me an assault bike, give me 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And I can have you redlining and not wanting to do anything after that. That stuff is easy. That's not necessarily coaching though. And that's what I like about what you said there about having those conversations in the beginning. Maybe the person hasn't slept very well the night before because their kids have kept them up. Maybe they're having a super stressful time at work. Maybe they've got loads of other stuff on their mind. And they've turned up to the gym to get their workout because they know how, they know they need to be consistent and get things done. But I don't see anything wrong with, every now and again, if someone is feeling a bit, a bit tired, a bit unmotivated in the gym, just sucking some of that intensity out of the workout. I think when we look at, as coaches, when we look at, frequency of training, when we look at, the volume of training that someone's doing and then the intensity, the first thing that comes to mind to take away is the intensity. I'd sooner rather have someone turn up for a session and we work at maybe 65, 70% and work through some real quality movements. We're not trying to go for too much load. We're not trying to do too many repetitions, and we get through that session because, like you said, we can look at different cornerstones of their fitness than have someone for one session, absolutely beast them, and then not see them again for a week or so.
That's right. Yeah. And it just comes down to like, how can we test their, nervous system in the right way? Like you say, we can, no trouble at all as a trainer, testing them and having them go a million miles per hour. But I'm with you 100%. Just quality throughout that session.
Yeah.
Over
And
anything else.
And something that I know that you're very good at, I see you do it on a day-to-day basis with your clients, is the other side of that, is knowing when someone, hey, is maybe at the peak of their week or the peak of their programming that you've got for them. They've been building up on some, some intervals. Right, this is the time. This is when we're going to go one set. We're going to go max effort. We're going to redline, because that's important within a training program as well. Maybe it's once a week, maybe it's once a month, maybe it's twice a week, depending on who the client is. And it's time to go and get that work done. But obviously that's something slightly different on a different tangent that we'll talk about.
Yeah.
With overtraining then, so we talk about leading to burnout and feeling maybe physically drained. And then we spoke a little bit about feeling mentally drained as well. That kind of ties in nicely with injuries as well. I don't know if you've ever had anything like that. I for sure have. Like, my ongoing hip injuries I still have now are down to doing too much at a time when, squatting and overloading my hip joint too much when I didn't have the mobility or the flexibility to be able to do that. And because of that, I'm still having issues now. And I'm always fearful of someone who gets into that, who gets that training bug. Like, don't get me wrong, I love it when people get the bug for training and they're absolutely smashing it, and they're wanting to do double sessions and they're wanting to do, extra workouts and stuff. Don't get me wrong, I love that. But then it's having those people around that are able to pull them back and say, hey, here's the consequences of what might happen if you continue to do this much exercise or you do these sessions, because the risk of injury is real. And especially when we look at our domain, functional movements, which majority of the time are using big compound lifts, multi-joint movements, lots of stuff around the shoulder, lots of stuff around the hips and knees. We need to be so careful that we're applying the right load and intensity to these athletes, to these clients.
Yeah, definitely. And just feeding off that point with how you mentioned, like, you've experienced it, and I'm not trying to knock like the background, when it comes to CrossFit, obviously going all out, and but what we do at Movement Wins, obviously, as you mentioned, these functional movements, but that corrective movement, making sure we're not stressing members' bodies too much, and also with our body now, like, you look back compared to what you was doing, I'm sure you can say your training is totally different. It's moved in a new direction now, and even with mine, compared to what I used to do in the gym, what I've learned and the experience that I've picked up along the way is changed massively, and I feel better for it. I'm proud to say, like, I haven't experienced any kind of like major injury. Saying that, I did tweak my neck doing a CrossFit session with you last week, but I mean, other than that, it's been good. I think I really can't remember training anyone who's suffered some form of an injury.
Just a disclaimer.
Taking a class or PT.
Just a disclaimer on that one. You did the opposite of what I told you to do, so you can that's your own fault on that one. Listen to your coach, I think, is the message on that one. Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's a good example of going too quickly. I thought I could do it, and then,
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Just the third one in terms of what I see, some of the consequences of overtraining is lack of progress. Now, I think there is, before lack of progress, I think there becomes inherently lots of progress, perhaps especially if someone's not been training and they step into that environment. You get stronger so quickly. The law of diminishing returns hasn't come in yet. You get stronger, you get fitter, you get faster, you lose body fat quicker, that type of stuff. So the progress is huge, but unfortunately that doesn't last. And then once you start getting to, you know, a little bit further through your journey, the specifics of kind of like the stuff that you mentioned already, the other cornerstones in regards to, you know, sleep, rest days,
Yeah.
appropriate load and intensity, nutrition, setting realistic expectations. Those things are things that need to come in. And someone might still be trying to go at their journey the same as when they first came in and find that I'm not getting better at the same rate as I was. And that's some of those points there that I listed, right?
Yeah, definitely. And with the fact, if you do reach a plateau, you need to kind of step back and assess, am I currently doing the same stuff I was doing a year or 2 years ago? You know, there's the acronym, the SAID principle, you know, specific adaptations to imposed demands. So are we loading correctly? Are we making that progressive overload when it comes to like programming? Are we doing things differently, repeatedly, so we can try and push through those barriers? And like you just mentioned there, we talked about it, those cornerstones, but sleep, so important. Nutrition, how can you mirror up your nutrition to maybe doing more training, so taking in more macronutrients, carbohydrates to fuel your workouts, and those kind of things go a long way into smashing through plateaus.
It's kind of I'm glad you mentioned, I know I said it, but you mentioned it again, like nutrition. And it's kind of crazy to think how people approach their nutrition when it comes to exercising from again, we're just kind of like using that person who's maybe just getting into their training or who is building up their training. What tends to happen is they usually, for better reason or not, like there usually seems to be some sort of weight loss goal around it, which is fine, like fat loss goal, however you want to term it. And what happens is intensity, training, volume, everything goes up, thus burning more calories. But then with nutrition, they usually do the opposite and they lower. So they create this huge demand of calories and then they're not supplying it. So it's almost like they're filling up their car at the petrol station and just putting a quarter of a tank in, but they're expecting their car to go, you know, for a full tank. And
That's right.
That's a real easy kind of like representation of what, you know, not fueling yourself well enough. And I guess that comes a little bit to do with, you know, just the media, people's maybe not having that education around calories and how to manage that, people not wanting to go into that, because I always find that nutrition just adds that extra level of complication and sometimes affects your social life, which you don't want. Sometimes affects you know, you have to prepare food and log food and that type of stuff. So people tend to stay away from it, but nutrition's a big part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we often, even as health professionals, we can make it confusing for like the gen pop, you know, who we work with. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really need to be that difficult, you know. We often advocate, you know, if they are, you know, focusing on a fat loss journey, you know, just taking less carbohydrates and less energy intake as a whole. But then, as you mentioned, you know, we need to mirror up. You know, we need to eat and take in enough energy to basically do all the activities that we're made to do, really.
Yeah, it's a weird one, because you have that conversation with someone who's coming in all the time and they're massively into their training, but then their immediate goal is fat loss. And sometimes that first conversation is, hey, like, I want you to train less. Like, I literally want you to do, you know, maybe come 1 or 2 times less this week or on a weekly basis, because you're automatically putting them in a position, if they're doing more, that they're going to surrender to cravings. You know, they're going to be hungrier because they're exercising more, and they're much more likely to make rash decisions when they get home in the kitchen. Whereas if you say, right, I want you to come in 2 times less a week, and I want you to actually, rather than come into the gym or doing that workout, what I want you to do is I want you to just go and get your steps up. I want you to go for a 20-minute walk. So then you can manage those craving levels a lot more easily that they're going to be able to continue and do that. There we go. The joys of doing a home podcast. You get the doorbell going. Okay, we're back. That was someone delivering water. Always staying hydrated. I think we were coming to the end of it there. Patrick, what I want you to do is just, obviously from your experience and from your own training and from how you manage your clients and from your members as well, what practical advice have you got for people who may be overtraining, maybe doing too much, trying to understand how much exercise is too much exercise?
Yeah. I think when it comes to overtraining, you need to just realize, just listen to your body. I mentioned it early on in the podcast, but literally it's as simple as that. You know, often if you're feeling unmotivated, it's a normal thing. You know, emotions play a big part when it comes to training. It's so much better to walk away from a gym session than do a half-hearted session, which isn't really doing anything. And what you've taxed your central nervous system for the next day. So it's a vicious cycle, you know. So yeah, absolutely. Keep it simple. You know, if you don't feel like it, just don't. You know, have a rest day. It's so important. Step back, recalculate, go again tomorrow. There's always a new day. And this is often what I when I have my check-ins with clients, members, that's all I say. You know, how you feeling? What's your week been like? And if they're not there, if they're not mentally or physically there, I just say to them, like, right, we'll have a break, or we'll have 2 or 3 days away, and then come back to it.
Yeah, I think that's great. And obviously experience as a coach, you're able to have those conversations, goals, and everything would have been agreed in the first place. So it's an easy conversation to slot in and say, hey, as a coach, you can say, I think you actually need a rest day. I think you're doing a little bit too much. Bring them back in so that you bring them back in and they can continue as they were before, making progress. Just one last one on that. And it's something that I've spoken about in other podcasts as well. And it's just kind of going back to those rest days. And there's a great kind of like quote, which is like, stress plus stress equals burnout. And then stress plus rest equals growth. I think that's from the book Peak Performance as well. I just think it sums up so well what we're talking about today in terms of how much exercise is too much. And someone that we spoke about on another podcast as well is like your parasympathetic versus your sympathetic nervous system. Essentially think of it as like your sympathetic is like your fight or flight. Your body is getting ready to take action. And stress is one of those things that stress on the body is essentially sympathetic. So stress through getting caught in a traffic jam, stress through work, stress through family, stress through exercise, literally lifting weights is putting stress onto your body. And that takes us on that scale where we're adding stress, and stress is important. Like I just said in that thing at the start, stress plus rest equals growth. So we need that stress. But then what's really important is that we're putting that appropriate time during our rest days, during our sleep, during our proper nutrition, that we're allowing ourselves to be more parasympathetic. And the way we make ourselves more parasympathetic is through those things. And there's loads of others that you can list on it. And more popular now is cold showers, ice baths, cryotherapy, meditation, breathing techniques. They're all designed to literally bring you back to that parasympathetic state. And you're literally just on this sliding scale. But unfortunately, too many people spend all of their time in this sympathetic state that they forget to pull themselves back to parasympathetic before it's too late, before it's led to injury, before it's led to burnout. So that's always a nice way of kind of thinking about it for me. And I always, if I'm training, if I've exercised a lot, I try and plot myself on that graph or on that little sliding scale. Where am I at the moment? Am I more sympathetic? Am I more parasympathetic? Well, my sleep sucked last night. I had too many drinks at the weekend. My nutrition's not been very good. I'm working a lot, right? Maybe I shouldn't go and do, I don't know, 1,000 burpees or something ridiculous like I would do. Maybe I shouldn't go and do 400 meters of walking lunges today. But then on a regular day, when I have got those things in order, crack on. I need that stress in my body to be able to grow.
Yeah, honestly, I couldn't agree more. And yeah, guys, it's
Yeah.
okay to rest. We do it all the time.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, mate. Patrick, that is your first podcast. That was a success. I hope
Hey,
everybody
awesome,
enjoyed
man.
it. Thanks for joining. We will be on
Yeah,
again soon.
pleasure.
And take care, guys.